I'm ashamed to say this, but I'm becoming so reliant on streaming services for my entertainment. While working on videos, I nearly always have Spotify going on in the background. I use it to listen to new releases, and even records I already own physical copies of out of pure convenience. And when I'm done with working on stuff, I'll sit in bed, maybe read a book for a while, and put on something on the TV from the copious amount of streaming services I have access to because I steal all my friends and family's passwords. Oh dear. And that's just at home. If I go out, I am constantly, and I mean constantly, listening to music, podcasts, or maybe watching YouTube on the train. Yes, I make it a point to occasionally put on a record or play a video game that I own a physical copy of, but that's becoming rarer and rarer for me, for one simple reason. Convenience. The great equalizer. If humanity can do something to make life even a little bit more convenient that isn't too expensive, make no mistake, the human race will dolphin dive in order to acquire that goal. I mean, people would rather use self-serve checkouts for their own groceries instead of talking to an underpaid employee. I say this because I use self-serve so I don't have to talk to said underpaid employee. And overall, it probably is for the better. These kinds of advancements have made life much easier for the disabled and neurodivergent. And call me a Luddite all you want, but I'll be dead in the ground before I try and use one of those AI help bot things you see on websites. I go on this tangent because sometimes we can be a little too lax on a lot of things that matter in the name of convenience or technological progress. Apple, please give us back the headphone jack. And the title of this video isn't really clickbait. Well, it kind of is, but that's the nature of YouTube. You can't rely on streaming services. I can name you example after example of petty complaints like my Paramount Plus not loading the correct episode of Twin Peaks I wanted to watch last night, so I dejectedly decided to catch up on The Last of Us instead. It was pretty good, by the way. Or when I tried to use Tidal for a few months, and despite most tracks sounding way better than Spotify, I drew a line at it not fucking working. But these aren't too common and can be chalked up to glitches, which happens all the time with software. Except Tidal, did a monkey write that code? As annoying as these things are, they do add to my overall point, though it's somewhat excusable. But what isn't excusable is the content not being available. This has been on my mind since late last year when I saw that for no discernible reason the Patti Smith song, Rock and Roll, was removed from all streaming services. And you may be thinking, what do you mean for no discernible reason? It has that word, you know, society. It's a song that's really easy to overlook the meaning of in the context, mainly because, to be real with you, even back then the reasoning wasn't great. Right after the release of the album it was on, Easter in 1978, Rolling Stone, despite praising the album upon release, didn't let her off the hook. They challenged her statement that Mick Jagger should be qualified as a, neighbor, and they said that they doubted Mick Jagger suffered like anyone who grew up in Harlem. And she responded with this word salad. Suffering don't make you a neighbor. I mean, I grew up poor too. Stylistically, I believe he qualifies. I think Mick Jagger has suffered plenty. He also has a great heart, and I believe, even his most cynical moments, a great love for his children. He's got a lot of soul. I mean, I don't understand the question. You think black people are better than white people or something? I was raised with black people. I can walk down the street and say to a kid, "Hey neighbor." I don't have any kind of super respect or fear or any of that kind of stuff. When I say statements like that, they're not supposed to be analyzed because they're more off-the-cuff, humorous statements. I do have a sense of humor, which is something that most people completely wash over when they deal with me. I never read anything where anybody talked about my sense of humor. A lot of the stuff I say is true, but it's supposed to be funny. Now in the biz, that's what we call word vomit to avoid the question. I'd like to remind everyone that this woman is a published poet before she ever released an album. She's very good with words. I mean, read any of her lyrics and you'll see what I mean. So it's saying something when even she can't really defend her actions here without dancing around the question and the ethics of using the word. She was trying to reclaim the word. I mean, she had her own definition, which meant outsider, rebel, or to quote her directly, an artist mutant that was going beyond gender. Now that's all fine and dandy to reclaim oppressive words, but you kinda need to belong to said oppressed group for it to hold any water. Even in the 70s, a white person saying the N-word was still a big no-no. There's no real skirting around that, no matter how much armchair philosophy you try and put behind it. But it's a hill she died on. She released it as a single, to the shock of no one. It got no radio play, and she's performed it live as recently as 2015. She seemed to have stuck by it for better or worse, until it got taken off streaming, and we still don't know why. Is it the label, Patti herself, co-writer Lenny Kaye? I mean, we're still in the dark months later. My guess is it's the label, since you can still find covers of the song on streaming, but it's pure speculation on my part. And right now, from what I can tell, it's kind of hard to find new copies of Easter, so if it's out of print now, that is incredibly lame. I mean, come on, if Marilyn Manson's dog shit cover is still allowed, why not Patti Smith's original? And as much as I just bitched about it, I don't think Patti really had the right to use that word. I still think it's a great subversive song. Patti's lyrics are as sharp as ever, it's catchier than it should be, and I love how it rages throughout the running length. And whether you agree with Patti using that word or not, you should take into consideration the context of the words before you go throwing labels at her. And on a less important matter than censorship, the album does not flow as well without that song. The track Babylog is a build-up track to it, and when you listen to the album on streaming services, the flow is ruined now. It's such a tragic thing to happen to what is, in my opinion, one of the best records of the 70s. And you might be thinking, okay James, you filthy Slav, that's all well and good, but what do actual black people think? In this article from Harper Bazaar about black punks, filmmaker James Spooner and singer-songwriter Felice Rosser both discussed the song and Patti Smith, and they both came to the same roundabout conclusion, that her heart was in the right place, but she was extremely naive in her usage of such a hateful word. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to read further. And that's for one single song. How many times have you been browsing your favorite artist on streaming only to find one of their best albums just simply not there, as if it never existed? Huh, I didn't know Jimmy Eat World's debut album was Static Prevails. That other album must have been a mirage. How long did it take to get Acid Bath on Spotify? One of the best metal bands of the 90s was just not there to be discovered by young metalheads for years. Judas Priest's classic Sad Wings of Destiny is nowhere to be found. A lot of old jazz artists who are long since dead sometimes just have the material go away because the rights are tied up. How come the Ramones just didn't exist between 1987 and 1994? Where is Samhain? And why the fuck are the original mono mixes of the Beatles' output just not there? Only the slightly jarring stereo mixes, and the admittedly fantastic remixes. If the goddamn Beatles aren't safe, no one is. That's only a drop in the bucket of what I noticed scrolling through Spotify for like 5 minutes. I'm sure you guys have many more examples. Something that really pisses me off is the fact that the Pantera estate refuses to re-release any of the albums they made in the 80s when they were glam. Yeah, I know that glam Terra isn't exactly great for the most part, but power metal is just a straight up traditional metal record with more thrash elements than glam. Sure, they look like femboys on the album cover, but the music does all the talking, and I love this record. Sure, it's dated, but it's fun. The more I listen to it, the more it grows in my personal Pantera ranking. And I'm not even a huge Pantera fan. And the album also has Phil Anselmo on vocals. Rex, but because Dimebag and Vinnie were against them getting re-released when they're alive, and Rex is a fucking hate boner towards original singer Terry Glaze, they're just never coming out on CD or streaming or anything. Now I'm sorry, and with all due respect to the dead, Glam Terra is a part of Pantera's history, like it or lump it. You can say it's shit all you want, how they became much better later, and I'm inclined to agree, but it's still there and you can't just etch-a-sketch it away. I'm not saying they gotta play She's Got Nothing On but the radio for the encore and the Scab Pantera tour, but throw us a bone here and at least chuck it on streaming services. Sure, I can just listen to these albums on YouTube or upload them myself to Spotify, and that's what I usually do. But dude, that's such a hassle. Especially when you consider the fact the great thing about streaming is its convenience. Also, YouTube's streaming quality is nowhere near as good as what Spotify can do, and Spotify is just MP3s at the end of the day. I'm no audiophile, I don't need to listen to only WAVs and FLACs, but YouTube compression can be heinous sometimes. Overall, I say everything should be available. I hate the fact that so much stuff is considered lost now, when if somebody was more attentive, it wouldn't be. You might say, well, the Judas Priest albums they made with Tim Ripper Owens suck. And I agree with that statement. I don't like them either, but is personal taste a good enough reason to keep those albums out of reach of someone who might like them? That's just outright selfishness. Say what you want about the Goo Goo Dolls, but I will always give them props for having their early punk material still available to buy and stream. And they didn't half-ass it either. These reissues are legit with gatefolds and colored discs, the whole 9 yards. Even though they almost never play material from this era live anymore, they understand it's a vital part of their career and helped get them to the point of selling millions of records. If it wasn't for songs like Hard Sores and Don't Beat My Ass with a Baseball Bat, we wouldn't have Iris. And they realize that. And somehow, when it comes to streaming, music is by far the most stable in terms of content being available. There's no albums exclusive to Apple Music or Tidal. You don't need to cycle through streaming services to keep up with your favorite artists and not break the bank. It's not like the next Carly Rae Jepsen album will be exclusive to Deezer. Sure, some have more features than others, but unless you're a big Neil Young or Johnny Mitchell fan, you're cool to pick whatever music streaming service you want and be content. And even then, cases like Neil Young are part of wider issues that have little to do with the streaming services themselves. In the world of Netflix, Disney+, HBO Max, what have you, things get much worse. Not only do you need an ungodly amount of money to keep up with everything, but content disappears daily, it seems, and they go ping-ponging around to different services. So if you bought Netflix specifically to keep up with Daredevil, you're SOL. For example, all 5 seasons of Arrested Development are leaving Netflix, including the 2 that Netflix made themselves, because Fox owns the show, and in the years since, Fox was purchased by Disney. But I still don't get how the last 2 seasons have to go as well. And speaking of Netflix, they have a horrible habit, I'm sure you're all aware, of canceling every show with less than 100 billion streams after season 1. It's gone to a point where people won't even bother watching a new Netflix show until a second season is greenlit, so they don't get hooked on another cancelled show. So then these new shows get less views and it galvanizes Netflix to continue this behavior. It's a self-fulfilling cycle. And Netflix are so bad when it comes to promotion of these shows that I never hear or see of them until they're cancelled a lot of the time. Even when you open the app, I rarely see their new series they have coming out. But yeah, they want you to rewatch Stranger Things for the 5th time, you filthy consumer. 2 big examples of Netflix crushing my dreams like this was for I'm Not Okay With This and The Midnight Club. The former ends with a cliffhanger, which makes it even worse, and their reasoning is just sad. Goddamn COVID. And you might think, well, why not delay it? Well, Netflix didn't want to pay to keep the cast and crew on retainer, and they didn't want to pay to COVID-proof the set, so even though the numbers were good, they couldn't justify the costs, which I find lame, but I can at least understand it. What I don't understand is not allowing director Jonathan Entwistle to recut the ending so it's not as much of a cliffhanger. It's not as if they want to keep the show in its purest form because they are not shy about editing their shows at all. Another big one, and a more recent example, was the cancellation of Mike Flanagan's Midnight Club, based on the books of Christopher Pike. And while it didn't end on a direct cliffhanger, there were a lot of questions left unanswered, obviously to be explored in a oh wait. Now for this, I'm not even sure if it's the numbers or if it was just spite. Mike Flanagan had recently signed a deal with Amazon for his new projects, but it's not an exclusive deal and he's free to work with other companies, and he was more than happy to continue with the Midnight Club as there was a lot of material from Christopher Pike's bibliography to work with. But Netflix did a Netflix and whee! It's pretty ironic that the one time Mike Flanagan made something that wasn't a self-contained miniseries, it gets canned. But thankfully in a blog post, Flanagan laid out where the second season was going, so we at least now have the answers to where the characters were going to end up. I mean, besides the obvious part. But I think I speak for everyone when I say that I would have much rather have seen it play out in the show. Good luck with that Dark Tower adaptation, Mikey. I have a bad feeling you're gonna need it. This trend is especially sad when you think about the fact that a lot of the best shows ever didn't really get their footing until season 2 or 3 or sometimes later, where the best material the show could offer wasn't until long after they first debuted. These new shows don't stand a chance unless they're a big viral sensation like Squid Game or something. And as for the big evil mouse, oh, I didn't forget about you, Disney. They've taken the liberty of removing one of the best Simpsons episodes ever with season 3's Stark Raving Dad, which sees Homer committed to a psychiatric hospital where he meets a man claiming to be Michael Jackson, actually voiced by MJ himself, though due to contractual reasons, he was credited as John J. Smith. And it's classic Simpsons. The jokes are on point and can still arouse a chuckle all these years and rewatches later, and the way the B and A plots meet is masterful with its culmination of the song Happy Birthday Lisa. It's such a sweet moment of television that I adore. But no, we can't have nice things because, you know, Michael Jackson. And I'm not going to go into detail or make a stand because you already know what it is, and I haven't really done much research myself on it, but for the sake of arguments, let's say he did it. Well then, what about people like Joss Whedon? There's way more content on Disney Plus that has contributions from that waste of oxygen, way more than a single 21-minute episode of an animated sitcom that doesn't even credit the guest star in question, including Toy Story, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, both the film and series, and the first 2 Avengers movies, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. The Avengers movies in question he wrote and directed. He's the reason why Marvel and many other movies since have that annoying, quippy dialogue, reverently described as Whedon-esque. And that's not even considering his contributions to films that he wasn't even credited for. But is Disney gonna take down the Avengers? Of course not. There's way too much money there, not even considering everything else that guy worked on. Even though there's almost as big a stink made about him as there was from Michael after that Leaving Neverland documentary. So I hope I make this very clear. Disney don't care. None of these corporations do. It's all a grift of the highest order, but they saw the controversy surrounding MJ and decided to prop themselves up on a high horse because they had the gall to remove a single episode of one of the longest running TV shows ever. Yeah, Mickey, I'm sure that really dented your profits of the next quarter. And if anything, this helped them because it got the Simpsons and Disney names in the spotlight again. So what is my ending sentiment here? Because it looks pretty dire. Well, it's as simple as buying physical media. You don't need to buy vinyl or 4K Blu-rays and get a decent setup, which can be expensive. You can just buy cheap-ass DVDs and CDs and watch them on your computer or your game console. Oh wait. If for no other reason than if the internet goes out, how else will you listen to your favorite band or watch your favorite movie or TV show? Lest we forget when Warner Brothers went on a rampage delisting a bunch of shows from HBO Max only a few months ago. Many of these shows have never even been released physically, so pirating is your only option if you want to watch them. When you have no option but to break the law to watch a show, you know we're in dark times. But if you buy a physical copy, nobody can take it away from you. Besides mommy and daddy because there's slurs in it, no one can stop me from throwing my copy of Easter on the turntable and enjoying it. Come and take it, motherfucker.